A couple of months ago, I made a promise to myself that I would not be talking about Booktok on this channel anymore for my own mental health. However, recently, some of the girls over there have been making all sorts of confessions about how this entire time they've only been reading dialogue, skipping huge descriptive paragraphs. There's somebody on there who has been complaining about how some books simply have too many words on the page, which, as you can imagine, has given rise to a whole new wave of Booktok related discourse. And today I felt compelled to add my 2 cents to the conversation. To quickly introduce you to the key players of this situation, let's call it, about a month ago, 2 relatively popular TikTokers made separate videos where they're basically telling their followers that they actually skim a lot of the books that they read. When I first saw the story doing the rounds on the usual commentary YouTube channels, I obviously agreed with the general opinion that it is a pretty wild thing to do. But I have to admit that I was also a little bit blasé about it, because really, you're telling me that people who have made it their entire personality to read 300 books a year skim the majority of them? I'm shocked. Things became a lot more interesting for me when I saw this article by The Atlantic titled "The Elite Students Who Can't Read Books," in which the author, Rose Horowitz, quotes the director of undergraduate studies for English and comparative literature at Columbia University as saying that college students now seem bewildered by the thought of finishing multiple books a semester. Reading this article and the wide-ranging commentary around it, because obviously it went viral, as many of these Atlantic articles tend to do, in conjunction with this Booktok situation, was very interesting to me. From people feeling like this is finally proof that young people on the internet, and specifically women, have been pretending to read this entire time to make themselves look cool and interesting, to finally people feeling more justified than ever in their claims that romance books, which is the genre of choice for both TikTokers involved, are an unshakable cornerstone in the continuous rise of anti-intellectualism online. I don't necessarily disagree with any of these statements, but I do think that if we want to have an honest conversation about 1, the rise of anti-intellectualism online, and 2, how Booktok facilitates that, we, yes, have to look at the type of content creator that gets popular on Booktok, but also I think we have to have a close look at what I like to call the Booktok commentary industrial complex. Content creators here on YouTube also have to admit that any type of video criticizing Booktok is a guaranteed success with the algorithm. I hope this is not too much of a hot take, but I genuinely refuse to believe that I'm the only person who has noticed that bashing Booktokers or the romance genre in general has become a bit of a YouTuber signature move when views are low. Speaking of which, the only signature I'm interested in having is a signature scent, which is why I'm actually very excited to tell you about the 3 Scentbird fragrances I've been trying this month. The first one is Nomade by Chloe, which has a fruity, flowery vibe, which is kind of similar to what I typically go for, but the third ingredient in it is oak moss, which is not something I had ever tried before, and which I was surprised to find that I actually really enjoy. In a similar vein, the other 2 scents that I tried were 1828 by Histoire de Parfum and Citadelle by Raw Spirit Fragrances. And both companies were new to me. I've been trying to push myself outside of my comfort zone with a lot of things this past year, but also specifically with scents and fragrances. And Scentbird has been really useful for that, because it really allows you to try different scents without feeling like you have to 100% commit to a fragrance. Basically, the way it works is you sign up and complete a short questionnaire about your preferences, and then you basically get to choose different fragrances to try every month, and they all get delivered to you in these really cute, colorful cases, which are also super good for traveling. You can just throw them in your bag and take them with you anywhere. I've always loved to play around with fragrance and keep things interesting. That being said, if you know anything about perfume, you know how expensive it can be. However, Scentbird is super flexible. You get to choose from 700 different fragrances, and each fragrance comes with a 30-day supply. So if you don't like it, you can try something different in the following month in the safe knowledge that you haven't wasted a bunch of money. money. To try Scentbird, scan the QR code or use promo code Alina to get 55% off your first month. You can get your first fragrance for just $8, and the next month will be only $16.95. That's promo code Alina for 55% off your first month at Scentbird. Before I go ahead and shove all of my opinion down your throats, I should probably give you an opportunity to see these videos for yourself.
This book, first of all, the writing is so tiny. Second of all, why are the pages so filled with so many words? Like, what the f? Why the f? Everything I read is a flashback. I don't give a f about your previous life. I really don't. I just want you to get your high score, and I just want to read action. I don't care what you did as a child.
I just feel like you guys at this point are like, why do I follow her? Like, literally, what actual reading does she do? Like, she's not a trustworthy source at all, and you would be correct. Does anyone else skim read their books? And by skim read, I mean only read dialogue. Like, you don't read description. Because personally, I don't care what someone looks like. I don't care where they are. I don't care what they're doing.
The second video has been deleted because this person was getting so much hate. But essentially, the creator was talking about a book that she was reading at the time, which she felt was dragging. And she said that she skips long descriptive paragraphs to move on to the action quicker and see if she's still interested in what's going on. The first thing that comes to mind right off the bat is nobody tell these girls about Proust. Talk about long-winded. Jokes aside though, as I was saying earlier, these two incidents brought about a lot of the same discourse around book talk and performativity and anti-intellectualism, most of which I obviously agree with. I've spoken at length on this channel about people's obsession with the reading aesthetic, the hot girlification of books, and the commodification of reading as a hobby. And I also agree that the tendency towards reading almost exclusively romance and fantasy books and the refusal to engage with any criticism of these genres or of some of the authors in these genres is an issue, and a big one. But I do have to admit that I remember watching a commentary video about this skipping to the dialogue conversation and going through the comments and seeing just how upset everybody was. I remember thinking to myself, wait, have you never skimmed a page? And the reason why I say that is that my experience at university as a literature student, both at undergrad and at my master's, was that the weekly reading list was something like 4 novels and half a dozen to a dozen articles. So you kind of had to skim at times. It was just not humanly possible to perform a close reading of every single thing that was assigned. Now, admittedly, if you then decided that you were going to write an essay on a specific book or go further into a specific topic, then you would go back and do a close reading of that particular source. And I also understand that in this particular case, these people have taken it upon themselves to be like this internet reviewer or person on TikTok who makes content about books. So nobody's forcing them to do it. So why do it then if you're not going to enjoy every single sentence and go deeper into the various meanings of a book? But still, my initial impression was the reaction that this got was a little bit disproportionate. And I do wonder if the fact that these two videos went viral around the same time as the Atlantic article had anything to do with the reaction that they got, or if it's just pure algorithm-fueled BookTok hatred. Not that the Atlantic article is in some way above the algorithm, by the way. On the contrary, ever since the online book community became what it is today, and it seems to still be steadily growing, I feel like I see an article about the dire state of literature or about how the younger generation has no appreciation or real understanding of culture every other month. And I'm not saying that these articles are baseless or that these are not issues that we should be talking about, but I do wonder if the sheer volume of them is proportional to the size of the problem. Or is it more the case that news outlets are struggling to compete for virality with social media stars, and so they just periodically service the same 3 or 4 moral panicky headlines that they know will get people riled up? A lot of people have taken the Atlantic article to heart for this particular reason. They feel like the article cherry picks information to build this kids these days narrative about how technology has fried our brains. And again, I'm not saying saying that this is not true. I myself am trying to go on social media a little bit less these days. But notably, this is the type of topic that magazines love to write about when they want to whip up some Twitter discourse. And in the case of this article, Carrie Santo Thomas, one of the teachers interviewed for the article, wrote on her Substack that Horowitz, the author of the article, failed to include any of the counter arguments that she offered during her interview. And that indeed there was a feeling that quotes were being cherry-picked to create this article that would get people talking online as opposed to a more nuanced piece. Some of the response to the article also consisted of people explaining how reading stamina works. Reading stamina being the ability to read independently for an extended period of time while maintaining focus, understanding, and enjoyment. I do recommend this one video by Jared Henderson in which he explains how a person begins building reading stamina pretty much from the moment they learn how to read, and how a significant obstacle to having good reading stamina is the way that people in the English-speaking world are taught how to read and how reading time is allocated in standardized education. I mentioned this video because I think it's important not to fall into the trap of scapegoating Booktok for issues with roots that extend far beyond the emergence of TikTok. I know it's easy because people on Booktok are annoying, so it's tempting to blame everything on them, but unfortunately some issues have nothing to do with them. And again, I don't know how many times I'm going to say this by the end of this video, but this is not to say that Booktok does not contribute to the growing wave of anti-intellectualism online, or that the watered-down Booktok book that creators on there seem to promote almost exclusively hasn't bastardized the concept of what it means to engage with literature to some extent. But I think that if we really want to get to the bottom of the ways in which Booktok fuels anti-intellectualism, we need to shift the conversation a little bit. People have really latched onto the fact that romance and smut are the preferred genres on Booktok. Presumably because it's a little bit taboo, and because the audience is predominantly female, and because it's very funny to make jokes about sex. And to clarify, I'm not saying nobody make any jokes. I feel like if you're reading sexy, spicy books and posting about them on the internet, you should be able to take a joke. But in my opinion, the growing influencer culture within the book space has contributed to anti-intellectualism a lot more than the simple act of reading sexy books. I'll explain. There's been a lot of chat over the past couple of years about how capitalism wins over culture on Booktok, in the sense that Booktok makes popular books that are accessible to the widest number of people, meaning easy to read and escapist. And because everybody on social media wants to be a part of whatever is popular because they either want a sense of community or simply have no imagination and they just jump on trends, more people buy and talk about the same books, which in turn makes these books even more popular and pushed to more people, and so on and so forth, until Booktok becomes this self-sustained hype machine. One thing that I think far too many people gloss over, though, is the rise of the book influencer or the book content creator, and the fact that book content is now a big part of the creator economy. Over the past couple of years, especially via TikTok, it has become increasingly easy to become a book influencer, in the same way that we have fashion influencers and beauty gurus and people telling you how to decorate your house and so on and so forth. And the easiest way to grow an audience on TikTok is to make content about things that are already popular. Within the book niche, that is, books that are already popular. And the reason why I say that this contributes to anti-intellectualism is that no matter their niche, the one thing an influencer cares about the most is numbers. In order to get views, you have to post a lot. And to post a lot, you have to have lots of books to talk about. So this intense desire to churn out as much content as possible to stay on the good side of the algorithm, coupled with this gamification of reading where creators love to set themselves an impossibly high reading goal every year to sort of prove themselves as real readers and as the authority in their space will inevitably lead to superficial reading and therefore superficial conversations about reading. And it's not just that there are a lot of superficial conversations, it's that there's a lot of hot take type conversations. The one thing about Booktok that I've noticed and I was mentioning earlier is that anything to do with Booktok, be it a YouTube video or a news article, will get clicks. Conversely, the people on Booktok, and particularly people in the romance genre, have noticed that doubling down on their refusal to take criticism also gets them clicks. And I don't want this to come across as me saying that I don't want creators to get paid, because I love getting paid. I think everybody should get fairly compensated for the content that they make. The issue with TikTok, though, is that even if you have a relatively sizable following, there's no guarantee that your video will not tank. It's not like YouTube, where people check in on their favorite creators or they see their favorite creators in their subscription box, or where a video has a much longer shelf life. Something that has happened to me a couple of times is I'll post a video and it gets a certain amount of views in the first month, and then 3 months later, it starts growing again. That doesn't happen on TikTok. So creators are incentivized to make as much content as possible and make it as punchy and as outrageous as possible. So I do wonder how much of this hot take type of content that booktokers make, especially in the romance community, is really just rage baiting people from outside of the community for views. Another thing that the TikTok algorithm loves is quantity, right? So again, it's not surprising to me that these people are skimming books all the time so that they have new stuff to talk about constantly. It's not so much that they don't have the attention span for it or that they are not intelligent enough to read a whole book through, is that they are trying to be content creators. And this is another thing that I think we need to keep in mind whenever we talk about Booktok as a community. There is a difference between the top creators on there who are constantly churning out hot take content and romance content and oh my god, I'm only reading dialogue, you guys, what about you, for shock value and for views and to have something to post constantly, and the average reader who might enjoy a certain type of book, but they also read something different and they follow several different people, not just romance people, and they might themselves disagree with some of the things that these creators are saying. Another topic that has been going around in relation to Booktok lately is Booktok's refusal to discuss politics. Basically, around the US election earlier this month, a bunch of larger creators were refusing to say who or if they were going to vote, and when their followers started pushing them on it, their response was, why do we need to bring politics into Booktok? Which is obviously laughable, because what do you mean, why are we making books political? They've always been. But once again, I don't think this is anti-intellectualism in the sense that these people are not able to form a political opinion using their own little brains. I think this is just another case of influencer brain. And once again, I was disappointed here with the criticism, because even some of the people whose content here on YouTube I enjoy really jumped on the lowest hanging fruit, saying stuff like, well, all that smut has melted their brains, they can't even figure out who to vote for. And I simply don't think that that's the case. The main reason why this type of commentary is annoying to me is that this is how people manage to dodge accountability. When you infantilize somebody, you tell them that they're not intelligent enough to know right from wrong, then you can't hold them accountable in the same way. How could you? They can't even tell right from wrong. I'm not sure that I agree that these women don't understand why and how books are political. I think that they are intelligent enough to articulate a political opinion, but they choose not to, which is worse. And the reason they choose not to is because they are book influencers, and as an influencer or a content creator, the more politically neutral you are, the more marketable you are. Especially on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, where people have noticed time and time again that political content doesn't get pushed out by the algorithm in the same way. So on average, most social media influencers are motivated to remain apolitical so as to avoid losing sponsors or viewers that might disagree with them. Anyways, I wanted to add a couple of thoughts to this conversation because I have noticed that a lot of the Booktok criticism that is popular at the moment really consists of the same 3 to 4 statements that audiences already largely agree with. And I don't think that that's constructive. Now, admittedly, I don't necessarily think that a YouTube video is going to change the world, but if we're going to pretend to be making commentary or video essay content, I do feel like it probably should be a little bit more than, look at all these people on the internet doing bad things. Aren't we so much better than them, chat? I've been having all sorts of thoughts about the commentary space here on YouTube and my place within it. And I haven't really figured out how to have better, more considerate and constructive conversations. If you have any suggestions, let me know. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. Use my code Alina for 55% off, and I will see you next time.